Hey, how's it going, Refuge family? It's Pastor David here with today's Refuge Daily. Now, in the youth group right now, in the high school youth group, we are going through a teaching series. We just started, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and we're calling it The Moral of the Story. And we're looking at selected parables that Jesus had shared. And we talk to the students all the time. We say, man, as humans, we just connect with stories so much, right? That's why people are willing to wait hours and hours and hours and hours in line at a movie theater, right? Back when we could go see movies in the movie theater, and back when there wasn't online purchasing tickets, and so you'd have to wait in line. But we connect with stories, right? Marvel has built this massive universe, and there is fans, and people talk about it all the time. It's household topics. WandaVision, like so many people are talking about that television show, right? Or Star Wars, or you get into all these different. Point being, people connect with stories. God, being God, knew this. And so, what God does in the person of Jesus, right? What Jesus does is he, to really drive home a spiritual truth, something that people needed to understand. He would oftentimes use natural stories and pull from the material things around him to share a story that had deep biblical, or deep spiritual, I should say, truth and impact. And so the parable that we went over this past week is found in Luke chapter 12, and it's from verse 13 through 21. I'm going to read it. I'm just going to share a couple of insights, and yeah. So it says in verse 13, it says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied, 'Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?' Then he said to them, 'Watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions.' And he told them this parable: 'The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I will say to myself, "You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God." Now, this parable, many of us have heard. And I oftentimes think with things that we hear all the time, and I say this quite frequently, um, but we tend to tune out, right? And so I was even encouraging the students. I'm like, this parable clearly is dealing with a man who has made possessions, who has made wealth, who has made success, the God that he served. He just wanted more and more and more and more. The parable starts off by introducing this man as a rich man. So it wasn't that this man became rich off of this harvest, right? He was already rich, and he's just like, I need a place to store all of this stuff so I could finally have that life of luxury to just eat, right? To drink, to relax, no responsibilities, right? In many people's eyes, the American dream, right? This man made comfort his God. This man made uh, material possessions his Savior. And so, I mean, in this parable, Jesus is not condemning the man for having possessions. He's not condemning the man for being rich, because none of those things are wrong, right? But oftentimes, and there's a warning in here for us when Jesus says in verse 15, which is the theme of this parable, he says, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions." The idea behind it is like we are people who are constantly being attacked, in a sense, by greed or by covetousness, by this desire to just want more, right? I asked the kids on when we went through this. I was like, what would happen if you woke up and you had $750 million in your bank account? Just a ridiculous number, right? how would you feel? Would that be the start of the best day of your life, or would that be the beginning of the worst life? And the reason why I asked that, I was like, okay, what would you do with it? What would you do with that money? And so many people like us, we would start thinking, well, of course, I'm going to get that car, right? I'm going to get it in that color. I might get another car in a different color. I'm definitely going to get that vacation home, right? For me, it would be Lake Tahoe, right? The most beautiful place in the world, right? I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. And before you know it, we have just spent so much time in our mind thinking of all the things that we would buy solely for ourselves, not for other people, not to help people, not to say, God, how can I advance your kingdom? Jesus, how can we get this gospel message out? Just so focused on us. And so we spent time talking about that material possessions aren't bad, but oftentimes what we see is it can choke out a desire for God. It could choke out a desire to want to go deeper with the Lord, to want to walk by faith. It's easier, in a sense, when you have so much, to have those things be the security in your life instead of your Savior, Jesus. If all of a sudden we woke up with $750 million and we feel now more confident and we feel like all our problems just went away, I feel like that is telling that maybe we place too much emphasis on this one specific area, whether it be wealth, money, security. And as we closed out our time, I really was giving the parallel back and forth of investing in temporal and investing in the eternal. Now, there's a man, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of his name. His name was Jim Elliott. I'm just going to read a quick excerpt from this article. It says, on Tuesday, January 3rd, 1956, Jim Elliott and 4 other missionaries landed on a small strip of land in the jungles of Ecuador. It was a dangerous landing, and they could not all land at once. For years, they had been dreaming of and planning for this moment. Their hearts were so set on reaching the Aka Indians, if that's the correct way to say it, with the good news of Jesus. Now, they were a notoriously dangerous tribe. No one had reached them before. Some had exchanged gifts, but always they would attack. For 3 months, the missionaries had been regularly flying over the area, dropping gifts and shouting greetings. When they landed, they built a hut and waited for them to come and find them. They knew the dangers. Their wives even had discussed the possibility of becoming widows. Elizabeth Elliott, the wife of Jim Elliott, says they went simply because they knew they belonged to God, because He was their creator and their redeemer. They had no choice but to willingly obey, and that meant obeying His command to take the good news to every nation. On Friday, January 6th, 3 Aka Indians, 1 man and 2 women, approached them. They exchanged greetings. The missionaries showed them rubber bands, yo-yos, and balloons, and the man was taken up in the plane. On Sunday, January 8th, they were due to radio in at 4:30, but there was silence. When no message came, a plane was sent and then a rescue party. 4 of their bodies were recovered, all lanced. The 5th was never found. It seems they were ambushed. All 5 were martyred for the sake of Christ. All were married, and 4 were fathers. Now, Jim Elliott, a lot of people know him for that story, but for this quote as well. And he said this: "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Jim Elliott saw through the lie of consumerism. He had seen the emptiness of all this world offers. He had realized the far greater value of a new creation that God promises. Now, this is what's so crazy to me. This is how the article ends. It says, several years after the death of the men, the widow of Jim Elliott, Elizabeth, and the sister of Nate Saint, another missionary, Rachel, returned back to Ecuador as missionaries to live among the Aka Indians. This eventually led to the conversion of many, including some of those involved in the killing. Now, these men, the women, the families that were there, just like many other people, right? They did not buy into the lie that this rich fool did in this parable of, I'm going to just hoard all my resources and I'm going to build my little kingdom here, and I just want to make enough money so I can just do nothing. and just eat as much as I want and drink as much as I want and be merry, right? Like no responsibility, just do that. And Jim Elliott and the other four other missionaries and their wives, they counted the cost and they said, you know what? There's resources, whether it be financial or not. There is blessings, that material that God has given me. I'm not the owner of these things. I'm merely the possessor and the steward of these things. And Jesus, I want to steward it well for your glory and for your gospel. And so I'm going to go forth and I'm going to walk and live in light of who you are, and I'm going to try to make an impact. These men gave it everything. And likewise, their wives and the sisters, when they go back to Ecuador to preach the gospel message to the men that killed their family. That is massive. That is crazy. Absolutely crazy. And so my encouragement for us today, just as my encouragement was for the students, as we read this parable and we see this man, he was not foolish for being rich. He was foolish for making riches the pinnacle of his life's pursuit. He just wanted to go for it, and he just wanted to make all the money, and that was the highest. He just wanted the money, right? My encouragement for you guys, wherever you find yourselves, invest in the eternal. Invest in things that matter. This does not mean don't work hard. It does not mean don't work at all. It does not mean that money isn't a tool that God uses. No, there's nothing wrong with those things. But make sure that your pursuit as a believer is not for things that'll fade away. Right? The Jim Elliott quote again, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep. You cannot keep your life. One day it's going to be asked of you. So he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. You cannot lose your right standing with the Lord. You cannot lose yourself. Listen, when Jesus has you, he has you. I love this quote so much. I love what he is saying. So again, I'm going to try to calm down here. My encouragement for you guys, Refuge family, invest in things that matter. Invest in the eternal, and don't buy the lie, and don't be the person like this rich fool who invests in the temporal. I love you guys. We will see you next time.